everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today I'm going to analyze whether this man, Richard Minnich, is a psychopath, whether he was faking amnesia, pretending he didn't know his entire family, two families, as a matter of fact, he got married twice, so one ex-wife and the wife he was living with, and all the children, whether after a very minor accident, he claimed, I've lost all my memory. I don't know who I am. Did he really have amnesia, or was he faking it? Fascinating case. And there is a documentary made. It's called Forgetting Dad. And I'm going to read to you what it says here. Rick Minnich, that's the son of Richard Minnich. He and Matt Sweetwood put together this documentary, and it's over a long period of time, and it's very heartrending. And it says here, the subject of the film comes from the personal experiences, and it's very, very much the personal experiences of his son. His son is right here. That's Rick Minnich. That's Richard Minnich. And his experiences, he went back and he interviewed everyone. He interviewed his mother. He interviewed his siblings. He interviewed his stepmother. He spent a lot of time interviewing a whole lot of people to try to understand, did his father really have amnesia, or was he faking it? I mean, what a situation to be put into, that the man that was your father, that you cared about, at least to some extent, would pretend he didn't know you. Or did he really not know you? So shortly after he had moved to Berlin, Minnich's father, Richard, lost his memory in 1990 as a result of a car accident. In Forgetting Dad, Minnich tries to find answers to his dad's incomprehensible amnesia. All right. And that's the problem. It's not, his amnesia is not, well, shall we say, proven by any kind of medical efforts. All the doctors that looked at him, looked at his brain, looked at everything, said, we don't come up with anything. Yet he claims he remembers nothing. Now, before I continue on, if you haven't seen Forgetting Dad, the link is below. Go and watch it. It's an absolutely fascinating documentary, and I think it's worth watching before you hear my analysis. But if you don't want to bother, you can still hang on here. But if in case you do want to go through it all, we'll click on that and then come back here. I also want to mention a couple other links I'm going to put in here. One is from Dr. Grande. Dr. Grande is Forgetting Dad, a story of dissociative amnesia or deception. All right. And I just want to stop and tell you what dissociative amnesia is. Dissociative amnesia is a mental health condition characterized by significant memory loss that is not due to physical injury and often stems from psychological trauma or stress. Okay. So this is different than what's called retrograde amnesia. Well, a little bit different. Retrograde amnesia is a memory loss condition where a person cannot recall past events, information, or experiences that occurred before the onset of the condition. Can be traumatic brain injury, stroke, infections, degenerative diseases. And then they sort of say, maybe it's things we can't explain. Okay. So according to the doctors, they cannot come up with anything that proved he had retrograde amnesia from any physical event, even though he was in a car accident. Somebody rammed the back of his car, and his head went like that against the, headrest thingy. And he claimed that actually something penetrated his brainstem, which wasn't true. So then, okay, you're kind of lying about that. But, and he didn't right after the accident, he didn't really seem to be that bad off. He and his wife went home. Everything seemed to be okay. And then I think it was a week or two later, he goes, I don't know who you are. Looks at his wife and says, I don't know who you are. Now, mind you, there was a lawsuit, which eventually, I think it was 2 years later, he got $325,000. So did that have something to do with it? Were there other reasons why he wanted to lose his memory? Like he didn't want to deal with who he was before the accident. It was, there's a whole bunch of claims that things that he did that he even said, wow, was I that guy? I don't want to be that guy. So that he just wanted to erase his past. And Dr. Grande, I will say that he does not believe that he had dissociative amnesia, that he believes that that's not a real thing. And generally speaking, I agree with him on that. Dr. Grande is also against repressed memory syndrome, which I am totally against. So I agree with him on that. And he was basically saying he believes this guy's a malignant narcissist who decided to, in a convenient moment, erase his past so he doesn't have to deal with all the things he did that weren't so great. So he could get people to say, oh, okay, so you're not that guy anymore. So we still like you. And then he also could collect on. He didn't talk about collecting on the insurance money, but he did. So, or the lawsuit, which he did. And then he went on to live his life for many years, staying with that he does not know his family. And no matter what his son did to try to encourage his dad to remember, he's like, yeah, not happening. So, all right. So let me start with that. All right. So I'm sorry, getting toasty here. Whew. All right. And if you're new to the channel, by the way, please do click that subscribe button. That does help an educational channel stay alive, and click the bell for notifications, even if YouTube sometimes does want to notify you anyway, but it helps out. Okay. All right. So what do I think? I am pretty well known for using the word psychopath and psychopathy a lot. And I am not, I will say this, I'm not a psychiatrist, nor am I a psychologist. I'm a criminal profiler. I have a degree in criminal justice, and I've been a criminal profiler for like 20 years. But one of my focuses has been, along with crime scene analysis, that's my main focus, evidence analysis and crime scene analysis. But I do speak heavily on psychopathy and people who behave as a psychopath behaves and causes the trauma that a psychopath, he unleashes on his victims, whether it be as a serial killer, or whether it be as a family member who is involved in domestic abuse, or even murdering the family, family annihilation, all those kind of things. So I look at a lot of and here's the one that we're going to look at now. The dissociative disorder, and I want to read a little bit more about that, in the sense that if you don't really have a dissociative disorder, well, take that back. If you don't have retrograde amnesia, okay, and you have what they call dissociative disorder, which is a psychiatric disorder, not a physical disorder, which Dr. Grande thinks is kind of questionable, that there's a psychological trauma that causes this, and therefore you have all of these issues. But a good portion of the time, when somebody claims, or people state that the person has dissociative disorder of some sort, dissociative amnesia, what they're really talking about is malingering. Let me read you what malingering is. Malingering is the conscious falsification of exaggeration of symptoms or physical or mental illness to gain an external benefit, such as financial compensation, which does apply in this case, avoidance of work, which does apply in this case, because he did work hard, but he had trouble keeping employment. And there was a situation right before this happened where he worked for a bank savings and loan that was looked crooked. And he actually, I believe he was actually a whistleblower, discovered it, reported to bank, you need to fix this. And they fired him. And then he was going to be a number one witness for the prosecution. And then he got amnesia. So anyway, and an escape from legal or military obligations. So there you got your escape from legal obligations. All right. So he click, check on that, right? For malingering. It's also known, it's distinct, they say. Let me read further. Okay. It is not a mental disorder, but a behavior driven by secondary gain, distinct from factitious disorder, which is also known as Munchausen syndrome, where the individual creates symptoms for the sick role itself. Identifying malingering can be challenging for clinicians and professionals using a combination of detailed history, objective findings, and clinical observation and specialized assessment tools to detect it. And I will say, for the most part, I think psychologists and psychiatrists have no clue about Munchausen syndrome and malingering like this. And this is one of the things I'm really big on, because we see in so many cases where people downplay Munchausen syndrome. Sherry Papini claimed she was kidnapped by 2 Hispanic women and then reappeared, and of course was found out to be a complete pack of lies. That's Munchausen syndrome. She wanted the attention she got. She was, and Munchausen syndrome and malingering are behaviors of psychopathy. They're not some kind of separate condition, especially Munchausen syndrome, which is mostly a female thing for the most part. Not always, but a good portion of the time. They want attention, and females get attention differently from the way males get attention. They get their feeling of power and control through how people respond to them. Men who are psychopaths get their power and control through different methods, like serial homicide or domestic abuse or whatever methodology they use. But males rarely use medical conditions to get sympathy and attention. That's not usually the thing, which would make him very unusual if he did exhibit Munchausen syndrome and was malingering in order to get, well, in this case, I'll say this, their description of malingering is a little bit different from Munchausen syndrome, and Munchausen syndrome is mostly about attention getting, where malingering is mostly about escaping. Okay. So he's not really Munchausen syndrome. He's a malingerer, which also would be which pretty much would be a behavioral psychopathy, but a male version of psychopathy to get out of whatever problem you got. And he's got them. Again, he'll get external benefit, such as financial compensation, which he got $325,000. Avoidance of work because everything was going to hell in his life. He got blackballed in the industry, even though he was very good at what he did. Got blackballed, couldn't find work. He was going bankrupt. Escape from legal or military obligations. He was going to supposedly be the prosecution's #1 witness, and then he didn't do it. And then after that, the savings and loan, the crooked savings and loan, as far as I can see, got bailed out with taxpayer money, of course. Anyway, so he does match the malingering thing, which would also make him a psychopath. To the extent that he did that, to play this game for as long as he did, one would have to say he had a lack of empathy. All of these family members who were like, Dad, don't you remember us? And he's like, nope. The wives, the present wife going, honey, and he's like, I don't know who you are. The ex-wife going, and he said to his ex-wife, he said, you seem like a nice woman. I don't know why I would have divorced you. But he didn't remember any of them. Not his older children, not his younger children. And so it's an interesting situation where here's the problem I have. On one hand, the malingering thing fits him extraordinarily well. And as Dr. Grande believes, he's a malignant narcissist who's trying to escape from his previous life. And he wants everybody to still like him. He doesn't want to be the bad guy. He wants to be the guy that everybody can feel for. And therefore, by not remembering any of them and having some excuse for why he's no longer going to be involved in their life, or no longer whatever, he's going to somehow still get pity from them. Yeah, okay. But to me, there is narcissism, and then there is psychopathy. And there's always that line as to when does a narcissist actually become a psychopath? Because a psychopath is always a narcissist, but a narcissist isn't always a psychopath. Two different things. So a psychopath is to the point where he literally doesn't care about other human beings. He's the only person that matters. The way he treats other people is only because it benefits him alone. He would have behaviors forever that would show that he's a pathological liar, that he has grandiose thinking, that he, it's all about me and it's not about you. So you're either useful to me or you're in the way. Now, he had this earlier life where he married his childhood sweetheart, and they traveled around a lot, and so he seemed to have, and I've got a little picture of him of the here he is. He seems like, and he's got wonderful, wonderful videos of him with in the first marriage. And yes, they travel around a lot, and they have that station wagon thing, and but he seemed like he really cared about his family, and which I thought was interesting. One of the things his son said after his parents had gotten divorced was that his father would drive a long distance to be at every one of his track meets, a long distance. Why? Usually a narcissist won't bother to take that extra time to drive, to be there for his son. So he also, when he married his second wife, he tried to encourage his kids. I want to be like, like the Brady Bunch, I want us all to get along and all be happy. And the kid, they decided to stay with mom, and maybe he just wanted to win, which it would be a psychopathic trait. But in spite of some of the claims that are made, later on, that he wasn't the best of husbands or he wasn't the best of a father, he didn't seem to be that bad either. But he did seem to be extraordinarily intelligent. And when he was working at the bank, sorry, that's not him. Sorry, I'm going to put the bank picture up. There he is working at the bank, extraordinarily intelligent, brilliant with computers. And one of the people who worked with him said that, his family said the problem was he always wanted to be right. He always wanted to be in control, which, okay, that could be psychopathic. But the other thing, which I think is weird, is that when he was working at that bank, when he found out they were doing wrong things, he went to them to try to make them right. He didn't want to go along with it. And he called them out on it. And he was fired for being truthful, which is opposite of what a psychopath would do. They could give a crap about truth. They don't care about whether you're doing right or wrong. They care about getting what they want. And he threw away his career to stand up against corruption. So that's kind of interesting to me. And then after that, he was blackballed and he couldn't get work. And he was trying, at the time of the accident, he was trying to start like a hardware store. So he couldn't get any work in the computer industry because of what happened at the bank. And so it basically destroyed his life being truthful, and then tried to get back on his feet doing something. So I'm having trouble seeing him as a psychopath. I am. I mean, I could see him as a narcissist. I just can't get over that point. I see him as a psychopath. So then he gets this accident, and 2 weeks later he says, I don't know who the hell you are. Now, would a psychopath play that game and malinger like that? Do the Munchausen syndrome thing? Sure. If they want attention, if they want to get something. And he did have some advantages. He didn't testify. He eventually got the money. And then I guess he got out of anything that he was having to deal with, so he could just go away and not have to worry about work anymore for the most part. He remarried a woman with a lot of money who was a lot younger, and she was kind of a free spirit, shall we say. And so they loved to do things like garden and do things for, like dress up for children and all kinds of weird stuff. And they moved to, out farther away, moved away from the family. And I think they went to Oregon, and then I think they went to Washington, and they were like living, out in the country, I don't know, out in nature-ish, And he is dead now, by the way. He died. He had a lot of health issues, had a massive heart attack and a bunch of other stuff, and died. But until the day he died, his son got to see him 3 weeks before he died, and he didn't give any deathbed confession. They moved when he married that again. They moved away from family. Now, before he married, by the way, he was working as a paper boy. He went out. He had these very childish behaviors, and like did things that were just like learning how to write again. Although he could write in cursive perfectly fine, but he was learning to print. So people think it was fake stuff that he was trying to do to pretend he was like a child again. That way, he wouldn't have any responsibilities, and then he became a paper boy, and he liked that because people in town were nice to him and like, oh, he's the guy with brain damage. And, and they were sweet to him. So he didn't have that heavy load of responsibility. So he would enjoy that kind of lifestyle. And so there's that part that makes sense that he's malingering, that he just wants to just get away from it all. But, and here's where I'm on the fence on this. Psychopaths have trouble faking it 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. He has a massive amount of family members. He had a sister he was very close with. They were like best buddies, and he didn't know who she was. Broke her heart. He saw his mother, and the mother thought he recognized her, but there was just a picture with him with his father and mother. So he had looked at that, and he knew that was supposed to be his mother. And she said, there's no way he's faking it. She said, that would be the best acting job ever. I've known him all his life. There's just no way he's faking that. And he'd have to fake it with every one of his children 24 hours a day, the wife 24 hours a day. That's a lot of damn work. Psychopaths usually don't want to work that hard because it's not worth it. If he wanted to just dump his family because he's a psychopath, doesn't want to deal with any of these people anymore, he'd just go out to get that milk for the children and never come back. God, more than one guy has done that, just walked away. Claimed a new identity somewhere else in the United States or the world. Remarried, even had another family, and didn't talk about the original one because I didn't care about the original one. He didn't do that. He didn't walk away. He stayed there. And when he stayed there, now you could say he was staying there because he's trying to get that money first. You could say that. But it's a lot of work to fake it every minute of the day. And he kept saying to people, they would say, don't you remember this? Don't you remember that? And he'd go, I don't remember that. I'm not the old Richard, I'm the new Richard. He would say, I'm the new Richard. And the family took him to medical people, that took him to psychiatrists. And they kept pushing at him, don't you remember? Don't you remember? And the psychiatrist kept saying, if you wanted to remember, you could, but you're not trying hard enough. And he got to this point where he's like, I'm sick of it all. I'm sick of it all. And that's the explanation he has for why he decided eventually, when he met this ended up in a divorce. His wife divorced him, lived in an apartment, and then he met this woman, and then they moved away. And he's like, I don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm tired of people accusing me of faking it. I'm tired of people accusing me of not wanting to remember. I'm tired. Just want to live my life as new Richard. Now, again, it could be because he really just wanted a life as a new person and didn't want his old life. But on the other hand, if you're being harassed about this stuff day in and day out, it's exhausting. This is one of the things the son said. Why was Dad trying so hard to distance himself from his past, from our past? The difference is it's your past and not your father. Your father doesn't think he has a past. He said he doesn't remember his past, so he doesn't have a past. So you're wondering why he doesn't want to remember his past, because it doesn't exist for him. And I had an experience recently, which was weird. It was a weird experience. I went back to a place I had raised my kids, a town I'd raised my kids in. 35 years spent in that town. We were a homeschooling family. My ex was the soccer coach in town. I was a Leche League leader. I ran play groups. I mean, we were part of the homeschool community. I mean, I was part of that town. I loved my home as a 250-year-old historic home. And it was the original home in town. So people knew that house. I knew who we were. I did fairy tale house every Halloween. People came to my house and went through the whole house with the kids. And, I did all those kind of things. And then I got divorced, and then I left that and eventually had to let the house go, and move on. And I had moved on. And I moved on to stay with my sister in Minnesota for 4 years, my sister and her husband. I was a criminal profiler at that time, which I was for the last 20 years. Then I did all kinds of things. I joined an Indian dance group, and I danced Bollywood dancing, and I performed with them. I traveled to India. I traveled to many places in the world, Cuba, Mongolia, Mexico. I traveled all over the place. And then I eventually ended up living in Bowie, Maryland, which is where I live now, next to my daughter and my granddaughter and her husband and all that. And I've lived here for a decade, and I have this YouTube channel now. And so I went back to where, I lived those years ago, which is 20 years now, 25 years, 20, 25 years. And I went back and I saw my house, and it just broke my heart because people messed the house up. But anyway, there were people there who knew who I was then. And what was weird is they started talking to me as the person I was 20 some years ago, not the person I am today. And it was creepy because it's like they were talking to a person who didn't exist anymore. And they related to me in a way that I couldn't relate back because that wasn't who I was anymore. Not that life wasn't wonderful. I have greatest memories of that life. I loved it, and I'm so glad I lived that. But it's also something I lived over 2 decades ago. I'm not that person anymore. So when they were talking to me, it was asking me questions like nothing had moved on for them. I wasn't the new Pat. I was the old Pat. And it was creepy. And I was like, it felt so uncomfortable because I knew they were relating to a person that didn't exist anymore. I couldn't wait to get out of there. So now we have Richard, who's like, I'm the new Richard, not the old Richard. And his family is pummeling him with, why don't you want to remember your past? And he's like, because I don't. Why don't you want to be the old Richard? Why don't you want to remember us? And if he truly has amnesia, regardless of whether it's a psychiatric problem or some other physical problem, he doesn't remember his past. And therefore, when you keep telling him he should remember it, he doesn't. And for him, he says, I feel like I'm living in a dead person's body because this body that I have that you're relating to is not who I am now. It's this guy here. This is the guy you're relating to, but this is the guy who I am now. And when you keep talking about this guy and this guy's life and everything about him, I can't. It's horror. It's intolerable, essentially. And in my case, at least I had good memories of where I was, so I didn't. It wasn't like, oh, I didn't remember, and I didn't want to remember. But even I had issues with the way people were talking to me as if I were that person that was instead of the person who is now. So here's a guy who can't even freaking remember his background if he's telling the truth. And people are just spending all their time going, don't you remember? Don't you remember? Don't you remember? Now, my mother had Alzheimer's, and I've always recommended this to people who have family members who have Alzheimer's. Never use the words, don't you remember? Because guess what? They don't. And all you do is irritate them. And you make them out to be liars. Don't you remember, Mom, when we did this? And she's like, no. So she thinks you're making it up. Or you're accusing her of something that didn't even exist. Gets them very upset because in their minds, that past event doesn't exist, period. I learned very quickly never to say to my mother, don't you remember? Because she didn't. And it was unkind to say that. So if he's not malingering, and they keep saying, don't you remember? Look at these pictures. Don't you want your memory back? I am in his camp. If he truly has amnesia for whatever reasons, no wonder he got fed up and was like, I can't take this anymore. No wonder he wanted to move away and be who he was today, to live his life today. He found this new wife. He had a new life, and he wanted to live that. And then these people, these people who are strangers to him, he said, "You're all strangers to me." These strangers keep popping up and saying, "Don't you remember? Why don't you want to remember me? Don't you know you're my dad? Don't you know this? Don't you know that?" And sometimes, as he points out, I was filming him and he didn't like it. Well, if he was not faking it, I can see exactly why he didn't like it, and why he just want to go away, because he had, if that's true, that he doesn't remember, he has no past, and you're just harassing him, trying to paint a past onto him that he doesn't even know exists and can't relate to. And his behaviors did change greatly after he got the amnesia. He had a more he was very businesslike and very controlling and very very, very smart and all of this stuff. And here he's much more childlike, and he remained rather childlike to his death. Now, sometimes he did like to control things, and he still had that in his personality, but he had also a very childish personality at the same time. Now, so was he malingering for 24 hours a day for that many years? Because as a psychopath, he doesn't have to do all that work. Maybe you want to fake it for the years until he got the money, and then he just bolt out of town, live in Tahiti. I mean, he wouldn't have to keep it up, because a psychopath. Here's the thing: a psychopath doesn't give a shit about you. He doesn't. So a psychopath might go, "Ha ha, had you fooled," because he doesn't care about his wife, his ex-wife, his children. He wouldn't care about any of them. He wouldn't care what they think. He just go on his own. Hey, I got my money. I'm out of here now. I fooled you. He'd be more likely to do that. And he never knew if he was going to get the money, because, the doctors had already said he didn't have physically, they couldn't identify damage to his brain. So his chances of actually winning that lawsuit were very minimal. He did get out of court settlement, which was pretty amazing. But he wouldn't know he would get that. So would he really think that it was worth 24 hours a day stress to do that? Or would he just say, I got to go get some milk for the kids, and just take off? He had abilities. He was a smart guy. And if he just took off and just deserted his family, he could just start up any place and take any job he wanted. And if he wanted to have a simple life, he could have had a simple life just by disappearing. He wanted to go through all this hell. Went through years of people pushing him to psychiatrists and doctors and nagging on him day after day while he has to keep up an act day after day. I don't find that psychopathic. I find that unlikely. That's not the way psychopaths behave. So although I can see all the reasons why he would malinger that they stated, the money, getting rid of the old life, not having to work the job he was at, whatever, because there's everything. Because of all of that, I see it. But on the other hand, the one interesting thing about the retrograde amnesia and the dissociative amnesia, which I think it can come on from supposedly, now this is all this stuff is very vague, and that's why Dr. Grande goes and says, I get it. I'm not opposed to what he's saying. Trauma can cause what many people believe, I'll say many people believe, trauma can cause the dissociative amnesia. There are people with traumatic brain injuries who are very supportive of what he went through and say, hey, I think he really did have amnesia. All his behaviors show me he really did have it. These are people with traumatic brain injuries. And in the blog link below, you'll see some of that discussion there. So the retrograde amnesia caused by trauma, that an overwhelming, just his life it was a mess, and there's no question about it. I'm not saying he didn't have a narcissistic tendency in there, and maybe really smart, maybe some other weird issues going on with him, but his marriage may have been overwhelming at the time. He was a whistleblower against a company who completely screwed him, lost his job, was being blackballed everywhere, couldn't get work. And then he was going to have to go testify in court. That's a lot of stress. And he was struggling with other issues, money issues, and all that stuff. He was under a great deal of stress. So is it possible that with all that stress, that did actually culminate in some kind of dissociative amnesia, where he just couldn't handle it anymore, and he just checked out, essentially, just checked out and shut down. And I'm not a person who's very supportive of a lot of the psychiatric stuff. Like, I'm not the repressed memory stuff and the multiple personality stuff. Most of it, I think, is garbage. But in this particular case, in spite of the fact, I can see the malingering aspect. I can't understand how a psychopath would malinger 24 hours a day for that many freaking years when he could just walk away because he wouldn't give a damn about anybody. So the fact that he would care what his family thought about him would mean he's not really a psychopath. And Dr. Grande explains this whole narcissist thing where some narcissists have to have everybody's approval. So yeah, I could lean to the narcissist thing more. But like his mom said, she didn't think he could possibly act that incredibly well for that incredibly long. And I tend to agree with that. I've seen so many psychopaths take other choices they can make that they would make than this kind of choice, which he was a very smart man, and now he's acting like a not so bright guy. That's a step down for a narcissist. They want to be considered smart. And until this point, people said he always wanted to be the one who was a smart guy. Suddenly want to be the dummy? It's not usually something a narcissist would do. It doesn't make sense to me. So, yeah. So I will actually say, to the surprise of many, I think he may have had some kind of psychiatric crisis that did cause some kind of dissociative amnesia. And there's also the possibility that in the accident, which didn't show any physical stuff, that there may have been brain damage, regardless of the fact they couldn't see how it happened. He had some other things he said, which I thought were interesting, which people just thought he was making up the crap. But he said he saw auras around people, something he'd never talked about before. And then he said he had these out-of-body experiences where he left his body and floated around, which I believe is probably lucid dreaming, which I have done. I've done lucid dreaming. I've never floated around in a body elsewhere, but I have had lucid dreaming where I'm aware. And I've done what's called a wild wake-induced lucid dreaming, where you actually lay there and you do almost a meditative focus on a spot, and you keep yourself awake when your body is going to sleep, and then you can go into a dream world and you can control things. It's very weird. It's very hard to do. So I haven't done it very often, but I've done it. It's fascinating, and I've often wondered, with that kind of thing, whether your brain is acting in a different way than it would normally act. It's abnormal for most people to have that kind. I'm a very big dreamer. I dream. I dream. I've always been a big dreamer, and I've always had the kind of lucid dreaming also, where when you're sort of waking up, you know you're dreaming, so you can go back into the dream and have fun, do whatever you like to do. So I understand what he's talking about when he said he was flying out his body. I'm thinking he's lucid dreaming. And if you never lucid dreamed before, I'm wondering if he had a brain change. Something in the way his brain was dealing with things was dealing it in a different way. There are people, for example, who have an onset of schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is a very weird thing, because, here you're going along fine till you're 17, 20, 27, and suddenly you're out to lunch and you're hearing voices and you're seeing things, and you have a very peculiar view of the world. Now, he also suffered from paranoia. So he started taping people and saying people, I got to tape these people's conversation. He suffered from some paranoia, and he told his son about it. So it's not like a psychopath who's completely trying to hide it. So with schizophrenics, they often have paranoia. Now, what happens to this brain of this person is perfectly fine, and all of a sudden their brain has changed. It's a very weird thing. It's like unreality is superimposed on reality, so they don't know which is real and which isn't. And so could I believe that there was some kind of brain change in him that covered up gave him that amnesia, covered up his past, and changed his brain chemistry so that he'd act childlike? And yeah, I think that's possible. And so I think maybe there is an unexplored area where we don't understand what happens in the brain. Because I don't find him acting like a psychopath would act if he just wanted out. And although I respect what Dr. Grande has to say, and the issue of malingering, and that maybe this dissociative amnesia isn't really proven, I get it. But I just can't quite put him in that category of faking it. I think there's enough things there that make me question that he really didn't remember his past for whatever reason, whatever happened in his head, in his brain, whatever he was before. And maybe there were things from his past that he didn't want to remember. For whatever reason, he wanted out. But did he want out with a complete clarity of him wanting out and I'm gonna fake all this stuff so I can get out? Or did he want out and his brain just shut down in some weird way? And I say I'm not big on these kind of theories, but I just don't see him acting as a psychopath. I don't see the malingering the way I would see the malingering with a psychopath. I don't see the lack of concern he has for other human beings. He seemed to actually want to care. He seemed to have cared about people in the past and his children in the past. And now it seems like he's trying to care for complete strangers, putting effort out, and finally just giving up, saying, I'm just exhausted. I can't do it anymore. I just want to run. Now I do want to run away. I just want to just live a quiet life with my new wife and just be the new me, the new Richard. So I find it's a fascinating thing. It really is. But for the sake of his son, I do hope that you can keep in mind that maybe your dad wasn't faking it. And that comes from a profiler who pretty much thinks most people are. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this. If you're new to the channel, like and subscribe and put your comments below. But do watch the whole video. It's absolutely fascinating. Bye-bye.